Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending this session. Just to give you some background about this committee, Human Data Interaction. It's a very new committee. It was formed just probably 8 to 12 weeks ago. And I accepted the invitation to chair it very recently at a time where I was really busy at the university. So I managed by working yesterday almost until midnight to put some structure around it and some early thought, which we should discuss and get your feedback. It's an interesting topic. I will try as well to legitimize why EC3 is interested in setting up a committee like this one. In a nutshell, really, this is the type of committee, if you engage with, you will, I don't know, you'll appear on BBC News, research, found evidence that VR is improving the safety of, construction worker across Europe, something like that. So hopefully this committee will get you there. So what I'll cover, first really to legitimize the need for a committee like this, I'll just briefly talk about the shift from human-computer interaction to human data interaction. And after that, I'll give you in details what's the remit of this committee, what we are trying to achieve, and the areas of focus, or basically a number of objectives we are trying to deliver. I'll give you an update about current membership, we have a few members who I contacted by email, but then I'll make a call as well for new members to join us. There is still a good space in this committee to join. And the future steps, again, some project which I have to be honest, I haven't discussed with the members so far, but they make sense, hopefully. So one project mainly, or a couple of projects. So that's what I will cover. And then we'll follow up with your feedback on discussion about the different areas of focus that this committee is trying to target. So the first thing is, traditionally we didn't used to talk about human data interaction. We used to talk about human-computer interaction. And that was focused really mainly on interaction between human and computers, PCs, as artifacts. So this is where the term HDI, human data interaction, came from. Interestingly, not only in now in construction, in built environment and construction, this term is not widely used. But if you look at HCI researchers that are computing researcher or social scientists, they all started to talk about HDI instead of HCI. It's a recognized trend. And the reason for that, this is like just a few pictures. It tells you, we generate data consciously and unconsciously. If you look at the example in the middle, this is like from an Apple shop. Basically, the moment you enter that shop, you're already giving consent for your voice and appearance to be recorded, to be taken. That was in 2017. There was a little bit of debate. I'm not sure what happened since then. And the one on the most left at your right is saying, you remember the time where no one, when you used to use internet and no one knew who you were? So imagine now, there is a data trails about everything we do on internet. This is really general, but if you look at construction, there is a trend in terms of towards ubiquitous and pervasive computing. So we don't interact anymore with just computer, we interact with data systems. So as a community, as a HDI committee, we should really broaden the way we understand that problem. So instead of our investigative lenses should be broadened, and that's generally in human data interaction in construction and outside construction, but construction sector and built environment is no exception. This is just an example of how data is generated by us and around us On the left side, this is actually an interesting article by Edri Singh. Is talking about the digital skin of the construction site. You can see we could actually get all types of data about construction worker, from sensors about the health, about the position, about what he's doing, and all of that sort of things. If you move that towards even the operation phase of the built environment, talking about smart cities, you can realize how much data we generate and how much data is captured about us, consciously and unconsciously as well. Already in construction, at any phase, design, construction, and operation, there is lots of data that being generated and lots of decision. Like if you think about machine learning and artificial intelligence, like companies like WeWork, they capture data about occupancy, and they are able now to predict using machine learning the occupancy rate of offices and spaces much better than human, and you can go and find out more information about that. On construction sites now, we collect information about as well. It's not about human, but human interact with that data, like about equipment, where they are, what they are doing, what their productivity is, equipment health, and similarly about all kind of infrastructure at all project phases. Even in the design, we are using increasingly data about designer productivity, about designer working pattern to predict the design effort of projects. So there is lots of data being collected. Now, the challenge when we talk about human data interactions in construction as a committee or as a working group under EC3, often is treated, it's not treated explicitly, it's treated implicitly. I have seen many presentations this morning about VR. They're all measuring the implication of VR on safety, learning, on training, and so on. But none of them really refer to any theory or to any method of evaluation based on non-HDI theory or concept. They all just put a generic construction method, the generic research method. So this is the first challenge, I think, for this committee, is that HDI in construction is treated very implicitly. There aren't explicit researchers who consider themselves as explicitly looking after HDI in construction. So this is the first challenge, I think, for us as a community, for forming the community itself, but also a committee, and for doing the work as well. So now I move on to the remit and areas of focus of this committee. I have to say I was lucky to find a report in the UK from a network on HDI, funded network by EPSRC. EPSRC is engineering physics. Basically, it's an industry council that fund scientific research. So there was a network on HDI, not specific to construction, and they came with a number of areas, which I'll explain in a minute. This is this slide about what this committee aims to do. So the first thing is we would like to foster and lead the research debate on HDI in construction and built environment. We would aim to act as the EC3 voice on HDI related topics and liaise with relevant industry and policy stakeholders that include industry association, communities of practice, funding bodies, and policymakers. We would like as well to play a role in identifying priorities for research in that area, and also education, and we could liaise with education committee on that, and developing roadmaps for achieving those priorities for the industry. Obviously, we need as well to engage with existing and new conferences and journals related to HDI topics in construction. So this is like the 4 key objectives of the committee. What are the actual topics we would deal with as a committee? And this is where I managed to adapt them from that HDI report that was published after an EPSRC funded project in the UK. So the first one really, which I mentioned earlier in the example I gave, that's often not looked at carefully in construction research, is we need to look at theories and methodologies used in HDI. I know in terms of general computing, software development, we borrow lots of things, computer vision and so on. We need to do the same in HDI. We need to look at what methodologies are used in HDI research outside construction and develop or adapt them for the construction sector. Same as well, we need to look at paradigms and framework for analysis, designs, and application. And we on the technical side, an area of interest for HDI committee is to develop and evaluate new platforms, architecture, or component technologies that involve interaction between human actors and data systems. So that's more technical area that we should cover. Another area which is, again, related to technology, but is different from the previous one. The previous one is focused on development. This one is focused on evaluation of existing technologies and design through different testing methods. This is really, really interesting. Policymakers are after this, and they often hire academics to do this because academics are independent. I recently been approached by the Construction Industry Training Board. The Construction Industry Training Board in the UK, it's a body that's linked to the government that can collect tax from companies, construction companies, and they use that tax to fund the projects, research project, upskilling projects. And in that, when they approached me, not directly, through basically we submitted our response to one of their tender and we were appointed, they were looking at independent evaluators to find out the effect of immersive learning environment on construction workers' learning and health and safety. Why they were doing that? Because they have funded over the last 5 years the equivalent of more than 10 million pounds in research projects to different bodies, different innovation centers all across the country. And they want someone, an independent evaluator, to find out, are those research doing a difference? And this is what I mean by evaluation. So it's an interesting topic to be as well included in this committee. The next one is understanding users and their behaviors to inform the improvement and the design of new systems and or policies. Again, is related to the previous one. It's about understanding the effect of new technologies on end users from HDI perspective. The next area is more on the application side. So you don't develop technologies, you aren't necessarily evaluating technologies, but you extend interactions through the development of new use cases and techniques. So this is another research area I thought would fit very nicely under HDI. The last one, which is I think the biggest, and I hope we can find some committee member who can bring that knowledge, ethics and implication. So this is really how we can understand the individual and societal implication of emerging interaction and novel uses of ICT and AI-related application. Again, this is really a hot topic for research, and I think it should be as well one of the areas that HDI committee should address. I know now, for example, between UK and Canada, there are joint calls specific on this last bullet points to understand ethics and implication of AI-related application. So these are the areas. What I tried to do, I wanted to put a framework around those areas rather than leaving them just as a list of bullet points. I wanted to put them into a more structured framework, and I put them in this way. Starting from the bottom, you have the foundation layer, and within that foundation layer, is where the three of the areas I mentioned earlier goes. And the three areas goes: theories, methodologies, and method of HDI interaction, framework for analysis, design, and application, and then ethics and implication. So those three areas are the foundation, and they will underpin everything else. So above those, we have the technical areas, which are developing infrastructure. So that's the developing of new platform, new architectures, and component tech, new extending and developing new use cases. Yeah. So that's basically the technical layer, which is either developing new technologies or applying or extending the use of existing ones. And at the top one is basically, it's about the outcome and consequence of HDI and this basically looks at evaluation of technologies and understanding users and their behavior. So I thought this kind of structure makes sense, and it will help us make sure that when we recruit members for this committee, we cover all those areas. So hopefully, by capturing those individual areas from that EPSRC, I think it's done on a quite extensive study, and putting this structure in place, we can cover really all possible area for HDI. And currently, who we have in this committee is the following. So I am currently the chair of the committee, and I've been really just for a few weeks. I have taken this, and my job so far was to define the remit of the committee and recruit members. So the vice chair is Dr. Anna Roxin from Burgundy University. First of all, really, the common denominator between the people I recruited are people either doing research centered on end users and involving AI or digital tech. So Anna Roxin does machine learning to mimic the decision-making process of individuals. Gluban Callis does really lots of research around capturing data and analyzing data around users in outdoor and indoor environment from energy point of view. And Professor David Kirk, he just published a book called HDI in Built Environment. Interestingly, he has a psychology background. So I wish and I hope he will be an active member of the committee, and I will try to. He's foreign to this kind of foreigner to this kind of community we have. He comes completely from social background, psychology background, but he's very specialized in human data interaction and designing improving human data interaction from end user perspective. While I'm 100% comfortable so far with Anna and Glubin, and obviously I need to double check with David if he will engage with our community. He should, because he accepted the invitation. The good thing I'm achieving equality and diversity so far, and I think we should. I think this is a message probably for the EC3. We should look after that aspect as well when we form our committees and boards. So this is who we have so far, and they all have relevant expertise and knowledge to this committee. Currently, I think the amount I have heard Brilakis earlier saying that the best the best number should be between 6, not more than 7. Currently, we have either, I would say, 3 or 4, depending on confirming Dave. I would like, I think, at least 2 members across those layers. So for the foundation one, which I think is a difficult one to recruit for, I would like 1 to 2 members on the foundation layer, 1 to 2 members on the infrastructure layer, and 1 to 2 members on the use and evaluation layer. So that's what we are looking for. I think the reason of having 2 on each layer, or even more, because when you talk about HDI, there are so many problems. That you have the VR and AR, you have the mixed reality, but you have as well things related to IoT and sensor in homes and energy. So I think I don't think there'll be an issue with overlaps. There'll be an issue in managing the committee to be productive, because the larger the committee is, the more difficult it is to manage it. But I think we could have more than one member on each layer. That's on top of what we have already so far, the 3 members we have. We don't have yet a secretary, so we have a vice chair. We don't have yet a secretary, so it's something that I'm looking to recruit as well. So that's the structure which I put in place, and the future steps. Interestingly, I think as a foundational project, because for all the reasons I mentioned so far, the way HDI is treated in construction is always taken granted, is always implicit, never explicit. I think a position paper, an EC3 position paper, talking about what HDI means for the construction sector, what's H, what's D, what's I. So if we could, I thought it's a useful first project. If we can develop a position paper on HDI, defining those things and outlining the implication to research and practice, and those areas I identified earlier in my previous slide are actually a good starting point. Here, I think I've been too optimistic with the second bullet points. I have seen on the proceeding, on the program, some EU cost proposal I thought is different from. But there could be in future an EU cost proposal that dedicated to HDI. But the top project is the first one. And I think there could be, interestingly, and I highly encourage, I think, EC3 to start looking at projects across committees. That's really would be a great idea to make the committee, to create some projects across committees. And here we could look at working with the education committee I'm a member of as well. I'm keeping myself too busy. We could look at a joint project with that committee on HDI in construction and built environment education as well. So that's all what I wanted to say. So any discussion, feedback, let's discuss, those areas I mentioned here. And if you think they are valid area for the committee to undertake, if you have other suggestion, and if you would like to join, let's discuss. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mohamad. Great presentation, and I really like the idea of this framework. I think it is a nice first step that could be built upon, absolutely. And I also truly agree with the idea that you do some kind of paper stating your positions as the first starting point. I have specific questions, but I'll start with a general question just to get the conversation going. So the committee, is there a difference between being on the committee and being a part of the committee, or is it really kind of you try to have a target number, and those are the people, if you sign up to be a member of the committee, you are committed to doing work, and otherwise you shouldn't really be involved? Or how does this, Jonas is in the back, so he can give the examples.
Okay, so the charter of EC3 states that every committee has 3 officers, the chair, vice chair, and secretary. Those positions are unique to a specific individual who cannot hold an officer role in any other position within EC3. However, members can be anyone and everyone who participates. There can be as many members as you want. There's no restriction. It can be of any type, PhD students all the way up. There's no problem there. The only recommendation I'd have for the committee is if you start adding people every year, you're very soon going to end up with quite a lot of people who are not active. And so it's good to have a takeoff rule as well. And the takeoff rule is if we haven't seen you for a couple times, perhaps you're not interested anymore, or something like that. The other thing which you mentioned about members, let's not focus on members, let's focus on task groups, right? So if you're trying to do 3 things, it would be good if you have enough members, of course, to set up 3 task forces or something within the committee that take on that particular task and take it forward. That's all.
I think it's a question. I'm very open to recruit more members around task groups or topics. The idea is, the key things is to make it work, to have you don't have passengers, you need drivers. My experience in everything you do is you have lots of passengers, people sitting, and very few drivers. That's a key challenge, and I probably with the board, I will discuss it, how we can make it effective. I was probably thinking like the more I have, the more members I have, the more likely I will have active members probabilistically, and then you can ask people, who are inactive, like to stand down. From my own experience, I participate in another very international group called BIM Excellence Initiative. It's a very active group. It's international. And we struggled a lot to get to a point where we make most people contribute. I think I could learn from that initiative on how, hopefully, to run this. I personally, which I need to talk to the board as well, how much application, if they have rough estimation on my personal time, because we all come from different universities have different ways of working. Some they have a little bit more space than others. So I think all those questions, I am open for a little bit larger than usual committee to get more ideas and hopefully, and then it will, over time, naturally it will shape itself to a core group, I think. I'm happy to start a little bit broader and then narrow down. That's a good starting point. I was lucky to find that report, which really I did all this presentation last night in a mall up to midnight. And I think that's why the lack of David Kirk, who comes completely from outside construction, would be great. So I need to try to keep him. He can really make contribution from someone like him. We could reach our goals much quicker because it's his own. In our construction community, I think, it's challenging to recruit people around this topic, but I'll be headhunting people, and I hope some people sitting here will volunteer. So did you ask me the question because you were interested to be kind? You don't want to be a member, but you want to know, to be involved. I think what I can do, I can keep you in the discussion. If you don't want to be a formal member, I can just copy you in all emails as if.
I think I would want to talk about it more offline, but I think I would be happy to be a formal member, but not that, again, it's about the structure. It's more about the structure. So to be a member of a task force where you're giving input and you're involved, but you're not the one that's driving a task force is, I think, a position that can be, would be very fine for me and maybe for others. And then maybe there's a different person that drives the task force, whether that's one of the 3 leadership roles or something like that. So I was just more curious how your vision for how it works. Now I think I see. Yeah.
Hello. I would just like to ask, we got this application for this prospective cost action that is being prepared, and one of the working group 3, if I remember correctly, is human data interaction. So is this going to be a continuation of this committee, or will this committee be embedded into this group? I mean, how are you thinking?
I think I knew about this cost proposal from the communication by email. I haven't had a direct discussion with Simon, who is leading it. But if he wants, obviously, yes, you can see HCI is part of, basically the cost proposal is around the 4 topics that are covered by the committees. If he would need, I mean, I'm happy to give my input to Simon around this when he needs it.
Because this emanates from EC3, so to speak, and
Sure.
it's the same name, the same thing.
Exactly, yeah.
I have first a question about what sort of people are you interested in? Because, for example, I know that we have one construction company in Sweden changing their whole infrastructure, their whole IT infrastructure. So they will have a new system where they can change things very easily. So they will have a new experience, let's say. So what type, is there an interest of such type of cases or case studies maybe they can be? And the other question is, well, I'm not sure how I might be involved. I am interested because I am a prospect PhD student, and what we are doing is that we have a heavy plan for user involvement in our solution development. We are trying to develop a solution for accident prevention. So our core idea is to involve people in the work environment sector, from unions, companies, workers, everyone who is involved in the process to actually develop a solution that can be implemented. So we have this type of thinking in our project. So this also might be interesting to be shared with the committee. So how we can be involved? Personally, I'm asking.
I think for the first part, that the company projects, I think we need to know more about what they mean by the IT change. It would be great when we have the full committee working for that evaluation top layer. If there are companies undertaking projects that involve HDI and they're quite interesting to use as a case study, we could send them some of the framework for analysis or technique we use for evaluating the impact on end users, and we can use it in some of the work as one case study for EC3 in a future project. So in future, I see we will have to have case studies with companies, and if members of the committee are aware of case study and they highlight them to the committee, and we have some project for evaluation, we can actually, yes, it would be great to have those real-world projects. For the second part, if you can join the committee, yes, definitely, and I need to send you the term and the charter of that by email. You will need to accept them, and then you become a member of the committee. That's my understanding from, I didn't know that, but I was attending the other committee meeting, and I learned about that because I am quite new to the committee. But basically, I can send you the information about, role terms and conditions. You don't have to sign anything. You just respond, yeah, happy with the terms, and you would like to join the committee, and you'll become a member of the committee. And I think your PhD topic is definitely relevant to what we do, so it would be great to follow up on this.
Okay, so now my more specific question, which is more about scope, I think. So maybe it's still general. So I could take your HDI framework, which again I really agree with, and I could copy it and apply it to some of the work that I'm involved with that's going on at my university on HRI, so human-robot interaction. And this is something I see coming up in the future. It's a scope question. How do we see, or how do you see something like human-robot interaction fitting in with computing? In some sense it's all data, in another sense it's machines. So, and then I have other questions about, and you and I have had conversations about our blockchain research, right? So, that involves human data interaction and it involves the technical side, right? So, are these the kind of things that you see fitting or not fitting, or how are we to decide about, maybe it's not even about deciding now, but how do you plan to decide about kind of scope issues for this? It's just an open discussion question.
I think, yeah, this is a really good question. And yeah, here you can see I deliberately put things in generic terms for that because, but when I mentioned about the need for new members, that the use cases of HDI are so many. You mentioned robotics, interaction with robots, and the blockchain are as well use cases. Yes, and they would be part of those. I think once the next step, once we outline the task groups in more details around these 3 layers, we could name some of the use cases more explicitly: blockchain, robotics, IoT, and so on. We could name them more specifically, and those hopefully we can tentatively try as much as we can to get it right now. But then probably if we do that position paper work, you will come up with a clear list of where things are, what should be done. Now what I can do, push this to a further level, give it more details with some examples, tentative examples, what this specific use cases could be covered. But in future, after the position paper, you can have a roadmap about all possible area of HDIs that are relevant to design. Obviously, if we consider construction as your area of research, industrialized construction that involve off-site, that's definitely, there'll be lots of other things to add. Any more comments? Okay, so no more comments. Thank you very much for attending, and I think the presentation is shared, correct? My contact details are there if anyone would like to contact me, and we can follow up. Thank you very much. Not yet. Not yet. Just so. Would you like to act as secretary as well? Secretary. Can you explain a little bit what means secretary? Because people might think it's like an admin job.
Yeah, sorry, it's one of the officer roles. The way into the committee at the officer level is always through the secretary. And then we have a rotation system whereby every 2 years, all of the committee members rotate. So you'd become vice chair, and then 2 years later, chair. So he's around for the next 2 years, and then he rotates out, right? That's it. Yes, you can.
Maybe more practical points, but so EC3 is a new conference, and one of the ideas, right, is that the committees also meets in the even years at a co-located event. I mean, I just noticed you have now the 2 others, or 3 others that you've listed, but none of them are here at EC3. I think it's understandable. We're new. We're trying to get it set up. But are they going to be committed to also coming and jointly co-locating so that we can kind of do some work in the sessions? Yeah. No. Yeah. I know. No. No. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
take that into consideration when I reach to new members as well. Make sure that are like regular attendee of conferences like W78 and, you know, ConVR and so on.
I think my only point is that we have to raise the, just understand that part of committing to be a member is that you make an effort to go every year to these events. Or, I mean, yeah, again, this is something that I think every committee will have to get off the grounds with this work, but I guess it's more a general point is that I see that's being a risk is that we have these committees and we have a couple Skype meetings. Because I was on these Skype meetings when Jennifer was first getting things started, and then she before it kind of everything changed, and we had some conversations, but you know, getting momentum I think will be the biggest challenge. Yeah.
How to make members contribute effectively. Sometimes it's really beyond their control. Like I'm a member of another committee, not committee, is an initiative, BIM Excellence Initiative, and I am the lead of one of really the most successful, not because it's me, because of me, but it is the most successful project in that initiative. It's called Macro BIM Adoption. It's basically developing framework for policy for digital transformation. And you know, there is so much pressure on that project to move on because there's so much competition, so much interest in it outside. But sometimes I just don't have the physical time. I don't have time to put it. This is something I think that's challenging. I don't have answer to it. Sometimes you go through the university, probably Brilak is knows, you know, ref time now, you know, like you have to do certain things strategic for the university, like impact case studies and things back in the UK. So there are challenges, but obviously we took this responsibility. We have to do our best to make it work. Anything else? Yeah, no? Thank you very much, guys. Thank you for attending. Thanks, I appreciate that.